So we are going to get started with talking about new updates to the 2020 calendar year H-1B lottery and what it means for your businesses and for people who are going to be seeking H-1Bs. And for those of you who are viewing this online, this is being recorded in December of 2019. And we expect further updates to come out in January and February and March as we get closer to the lottery itself, but this is the latest that we know now. So just to introduce ourselves a little bit, my name is Sophie Alcorn and I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law. We are the fastest growing immigration law firm in Silicon Valley, serving many early stage startups, growing technology companies, and highly talented individuals from around the world. Our mission is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world by practicing compassionate, cutting edge, and rigorous immigration law in the service of the betterment of humanity. And I'm really proud that we have been maintaining a 95% success rate on our cases, even with everything you hear about the current administration. And what I chalk that up to is that we try to be very compassionate and set detailed legal strategies at the beginning of every case for every single client. So our team, this is me. I'm an attorney licensed in California. I'm also a board certified specialist in California in immigration law. So I've done hundreds or I don't know, maybe thousands of cases in lots of different areas of subfields of immigration law, and there's a peer review process and an extra bar exam. So there's only 2 of us, as far as I know, in Santa Clara County right now. My dad was an immigration lawyer, and I also write for TechCrunch and speak at the TechCrunch conferences around the world. I just got back from Berlin a few days ago. This is my associate, Amina Kashari. She's a wonderful, super caring business immigration attorney who is an immigrant herself. She moved to the US from Iraq at the age of 12, and she really cares about serving our clients. And our team is growing as well. Everybody is mostly immigrants and children of immigrants and married to immigrants, so for all of us it's really personal. So just to tell you a little bit about my background, this is my great-grandfather, John Grana, who immigrated to the United States from Sicily in the early 20th century. He came on a ship from Italy across the Atlantic to Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, all of that, like masses of people being registered coming off of boats. And I don't know if this has
It's not going to work on the screen.
Oh, okay. Well, this is his certificate of citizenship, and it cracks me up because his visible distinctive marks were that his right arm was permanently bent and his thumb was broken. And he lived in Chicago in the 1920s, which you would think of like the Sicilian Mafia. So I don't know if that's what he did, but legend has it that he made his money through illegal liquor runs from Canada during Prohibition to bring whiskey to all of the doctors, lawyers, judges, and policemen in the town where they lived. And then this is just a little snapshot of our firm, our team. We try to go to our clients' green card interviews with them wherever possible. These are my kids. This is our friendly office dog named Willie who comes to give us a hand and help our clients every now and then. So we have a lot of fun helping people. And, we're privileged to work with brilliant people who have attended top universities from all around the world. The startups we support have really high-profile investors, Sequoia, YC. One of our clients just had a $500 million Series D round led by SoftBank, so we're really proud and happy for them. And we've also supported employees from top companies, typically to break away and create their own startups. So it's fun. And we've been in the news quite a bit. And we've won awards as well. So, and we recently got certified as a woman-owned business. So if any of your companies need like brownie points for supplier diversity, that can be a plus. Okay, so what do you need to know about immigration? I mean, you're here because you already know that immigration law is complex. It is super complicated. Back when I was in law school, it was really uncool to be an immigration lawyer. Nobody could understand why I wanted to do it. And it was like, oh, you want to like help people and not make a lot of money? Okay, all right. It's really complicated, and it's fascinating as an attorney because it's changing all the time. And if it's confusing to you and frustrating to you, you're not alone. It's objectively a hard thing to navigate. And so it's unfortunate that people who often don't even speak English as a first language are the ones who have to go through this system. And even federal judges write in their opinions like, oh, this is so complicated, this is more complicated than tax law. So, there you go. So if you're frustrated about it, you're not alone. It is hard. But just as a high-level overview, if somebody was born in the US or had US citizen parents, they're a citizen. Otherwise, to have permission to live here and work here legally, they either need a temporary status, which is a visa, or a permanent status, which is a green card. So that's like super high-level overview. So most people think they need a visa first, and then they come here, and then while they're here they wait, and then after that they can get a green card, and then they become a citizen. But in case it's relevant, if you have anybody who you want to sponsor to come here in a few years, they don't actually need to have a visa to come here first. Somebody who's outside of the United States could wait for their turn in line and get a green card to come here without having a visa. Now, in general, because we're going to be focusing on the H-1B lottery and candidates for businesses who need H-1Bs, this is the typical path that one of those individuals would probably go through. They'll probably have come to the United States as a student in F1 status, attending a university. And then during that time, they optionally can participate in CPT, curricular practical training, which could be a paid internship during school. And then after they graduate from a US university, they're eligible for F1 OPT, and that's optional practical training, and that's a 1-year work permit regardless of your major. So if you get a bachelor's degree, you get it, then again at a master's degree you would get it, and then again at a PhD you would get it. Now, if your major or your field of study was a STEM degree, so science, technology, engineering, or math, the person would then be eligible for a 2-year STEM OPT extension. And whereas OPT, you could work for anybody, you could be self-employed. For STEM OPT, you have to work for a company, there needs to be a training plan, and the company needs to be in the E-Verify system. So usually the hope from the beneficiary, the foreign national standpoint, is, okay, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get my 3 years of OPT and STEM OPT, I'm going to find a great company that's willing to sponsor me in the H-1B lottery, and hopefully we can do that every single year until I get picked and I get an H-1B. And if I don't get picked on an H-1B, I guess I'll go back to school, get another master's, or do something with CPT to try to keep working and try to get more chances in the H-1B lottery. Once somebody has an H-1B, then they hope that the company will sponsor them for the green card process, which typically starts with something called PERM, a labor certification, then an I-140 petition, and then eventually when their priority date is current, they could apply for adjustment of status, which is actually getting a green card. And then after somebody's had a green card for 5 years, then they could apply for citizenship on their own. So that's like often the path for professionals in Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of options for visas and green cards. You all have this chart. We also have it available as a PDF, so you're welcome to get it that way. We'll share it with all of you, and you're welcome to distribute it to any candidates or people on your teams who need to understand it. This chart is longer than here, and it really breaks down all of the ways for people to come to the United States. So our laws carve out many more categories than this, but this is the most relevant for Silicon Valley. There's categories based on investment, working for a multinational company, people with extraordinary ability, and talented individuals. And within all of those slices, there's also short-term visa options and long-term green card options. And so this breaks down who's eligible, what are the steps, and what do you get when you have it. So this is not everything, but it's the most common. Things that aren't on here that are like weird little niche things are Australia, Chile, Singapore, Canada, and Mexico all have their own little visa carve-outs for professionals with different requirements. So let's talk about H-1B basics. So the H-1B, when I talk about this, I always think, okay, if we're gonna start out talking about the H-1B, just on a high level, like why is it even called that? It's just because the Immigration and Nationality Act, which was written in 1965, has 300 sections, and on one of them, so I think it's 212A, there's a subsection H, subsection 1, subsection B, because it's an outline, and so that part, H-1A talks about nurses, H-1B talks about professionals, H-2A talks about farm workers. So this is just section H-1B of the law. So this is for people who are in a specialty occupation, so doing a professional type of job. They have a bachelor's degree in a relevant field or equivalent work experience, and they must be paid a prevailing wage, which depends on the geographic area where they're working out of and how much typically other people make in that area. So you could, so like a specialty occupation doesn't have to be in technology. It could be in marketing, it could be in business. And also, if the person graduated in a different field, you can get an educational equivalence evaluation to prove that, this person's 2 years of general education in college plus 6 years of work experience in XYZ field is equivalent to a 4 years bachelor degree in the relevant field. So in general, 3 years of work experience is equivalent to 1 year in university. Okay, so then the other really important fact about H-1Bs is that the total number is limited by Congress. So every year there are 65,000 new regular H-1Bs available, plus an additional set aside for people with US master's degrees and PhDs, called the master's cap. So the government fiscal year begins October 1st every year, and the earliest you can apply is 6 months ahead of time. So that's why there's this April lottery, because April is 6 months ahead of October. And the reason that there's a lottery is because there's 85,000 total new H-1Bs every year, but about 200,000 people have been applying over the last several years. So historically, that's meant about a 1 in 3 chance for people to be accepted in the lottery. So this is pretty rough, but in general, 55% of the people receiving H-1Bs historically have been from India, 35% have been from China, and about 10% have been from Europe. Obviously, people have come from other countries as well. But there's no, so for green cards, the country you were born in does affect when you'll get a green card. But for H-1B visas, the lottery is the same regardless of what country the person was born in or they're a citizen of. So now the duration. So in H-1B, the earliest possible start date for a new H-1B is October 1st of every year. So for candidates in the April 2020 lottery, their earliest start date will be October 1st, 2020. The most you can request for a single H-1B is 3 years, but it can be extended up to 6 years total in general. And then if the person is also being sponsored for a green card before the beginning of the 6th and final year of H-1B status, then they're eligible for green card extensions indefinitely until their green card becomes available. They can keep working in the United States. There's also something called cap gap, which is important for students and recent graduates whose OPT or STEM OPT will be expiring sometime between the April lottery and the October 1st start date. They are eligible to continue living and working in the United States while they're awaiting the H-1B decision, or if it's approved, up until October 1st. So if it gets denied before October 1st, they have to stop. And if it's still pending and undecided after October 1st, they can stay in the US, but they can't work. But hopefully at that point soon, they'll actually get the approval and then they can start working again. So something that happened this year, actually, in 2019, April, that benefited a lot of our clients was a regulation to change the order that the lottery is done in. And so the people who have the special 20,000 H-1B set aside for master's degrees and PhDs, they changed the order of the lottery, so those folks essentially get 2 bites at the apple. So they get first they get a chance to be in the 20,000 selection, and then they get another chance in the general lottery. And that really increased their probability of being picked. From all the clients we helped, we found that instead of like a 30% acceptance rate, those individuals were being selected about 80% of the time. So if you're choosing between 2 equally qualified international candidates, but one of them has a master's degree from a US school, that person would have a higher chance of being selected in the lottery. Yes?
The US modifier, does it also apply to the PhD? So is it US masters and PhDs, or is it US PhDs?
Yeah, so the question is, does the master's allotment count for PhDs? Yes, so master's degrees and higher. So PhDs get to be in this special group as well. So if you got your PhD from a US university, you're allowed to participate in this cap. So the way it has worked, okay, and then another weird thing is that the government fiscal year starts, the government fiscal year starts on October 1st, like October 1st, 2019 was the start of fiscal year 2020 for the US government. So for the cycle we just completed, the historical way this has all been done is that there's no electronic registration. Everybody's scrambling to create the full H-1B packages in winter time. So you pay the lawyer, you spend all of the time and money to get everything ready. You write checks for the government filing fees, and you send it all in on paper on April 1st and hope the person gets selected. And if they don't get selected, well, the government doesn't cash your checks, but you still spent a lot of time and money with the law firm to get everything ready, and you didn't know if it was going to be selected or not. So a lot of small companies were just unable or unwilling to make that commitment, so they couldn't really participate in this at all. But now, this new electronic registration system, I think, is going to help a lot of small businesses and startups, which is really great, and big companies as well. So they're launching this new electronic registration system. So I'm going to be talking a lot about that. Basically, the government is charging $10 to put somebody's name in, so that's great. And it's your choice now if you want to hire, and we'll talk about considerations for why you might want to do this, but you don't really have to pay a lawyer to create the whole application until after you know the person has been selected. So you can actually focus your resources on people who have a chance. And we'll talk about maybe if you want to do it in advance, not knowing if they're going to be selected, why you might want to do that. Oh, and then one other change is that premium processing has gone up by $300 over the last year. So now that's $1,440, and basically that's optional, and it shrinks the government processing time down from about 7 to 10 months down to 15 days. So it's probably worth it. It could increase the amount of scrutiny on the petition. They say officially it's not supposed to, but lawyers speculate that it might, but I don't know. Okay, so here is how this new system is going to work. So there's an online registration system where companies or companies' attorneys can register all of the candidates. They are going to be opening up this registration period before April. So the window is March 1st of 2020 to March 20th of 2020. So you have to get anybody who you might possibly want to work for you on H-1B into this system during that window, or else it's too late. Then they're going to actually have this lottery, and the lottery will happen sometime between March 20th and March 31st. And so then at some point, the public or the participants will be notified if their beneficiaries were selected in the lottery. And then there will be a 90-day period to actually submit the prepared H-1B petitions. So the filing fee will be paid, the $10 can be paid with a checking account, savings account, debit card, or credit card through the pay.gov portal. And I think you will not have to make an account on here, which will be nice because that's a cumbersome process. And then they've released screenshots of what this new electronic lottery system will look like. So, it's not released yet, and they might change it, but this is what it's probably gonna look like. So, step 1, go to online filing. Step 2, create new account. Step 3, enter your email. Step 4, confirm account. Step 5, create password. Step 6, select your preferences for getting backup passwords. So, it's an online portal. And then this is a preview of what the actual registration website is going to look like. So, who's eligible? US employers and agents. There's a warning against duplicates. So any employer or agent may only submit one registration per beneficiary in any fiscal year. If you submit more than one registration per beneficiary, all registrations filed by that company related to that person will be considered invalid. So if you're a company, you can only put in Bob Smith once. You can't put in Bob Smith twice. If your affiliate, other related company with a different tax identification number also sponsors Bob Smith, that would be technically legal. And some of this isn't quite fleshed out, and I could see some legal problems with the way they've created this mock-up, because my understanding is that a company can submit 2 H-1Bs for one person for 2 distinct job roles. So that would no longer be possible here. Also, it provides an option for agents to sponsor H-1Bs for self-employed individuals, which I also thought wasn't the case. So I'm learning things from this new system, and maybe some of it will be subject to litigation, I don't know. Okay, so, there's standard legal compliance boilerplate, and one thing that's nice is that it does automatically save your responses. So I'm so glad they added that, because that can be really frustrating. But then it's very simple. What's the company's name? Do you have a DBA? What's your employer identification number? What's your address? Who's the signatory? Their title, their contact information. And then you can just add multiple beneficiaries. So what is the beneficiary's name, gender? Do they have a master's or PhD from a US university, date of birth, country of citizenship, passport number. And then you just can keep adding people into this system. And you can delete them as well if something happens. So that's great. That's it's fairly straightforward. And so, companies can do it for as many people as they would like, and it's just gonna be $10 per person. So, how to start preparing now? I think given that there will be only a 90-day window to prepare the H-1B petitions for anybody who's been selected, it could be good to just do some low investment things, low cost things to start getting ready in advance to avoid a rush at the end. So any candidates could start gathering their documents, so their transcripts from universities, their diplomas, their CVs or resumes, any past immigration documents. And if you know that somebody might need to get an education evaluation, it'd probably be good to do that before April. It's like $200 to $500 per person, so it could be good just to have that on hand, and you could use that in the future if you needed to later. For companies, especially new companies who are just starting with H-1Bs, we need to get their employer identification numbers validated with the Department of Labor. And it's also helpful to make sure that this person can actually qualify for an H-1B, that the intended job is professional and can count, and that it has the right job duties, and that the person is actually legally qualified to be able to do this job. Also, gathering documents related to the company is valuable. If it's a brand new company, screenshots of the website, marketing materials, pitch deck, any taxes if it's an early stage startup to show that it's actually in business. So another question that HR and People Ops often has is, do my employees have to leave the country, and how are we setting up this H-1B to begin with? Because there's two ways to get H-1B status for somebody who's already in the United States. So if somebody's already here on OPT, for example, they could apply for change of status, or they could choose to go outside of the US for a visa interview and do consular processing at a US consulate in another country. So both are possible. Typically, most people who are here choose to do a change of status so that on October 1st, they're automatically in H-1B status if they've been approved. But the issue can be that your travel is restricted when this petition's pending. So if you have an employee who has, is doing business development and needs to go to international conferences, they wouldn't be able to leave on a change of status. That could jeopardize their H-1B. They would have to wait to travel until after October 1st and then get a visa to come back in. So for those people, it might just be simpler to do it through consular processing. But it's on a case-by-case basis, so that's a good thing to figure out at the beginning of the process so everybody's on the same page. So this is the suspected timeline that I think will be happening. So now is the time to select your attorneys to support you with this process and to decide which of your existing employees you will be sponsoring in the lottery. Of course, in January, February, and even to some extent in March, you could easily add additional candidates as you hire more people. Now, January to March, so you probably don't have to do that much, but if you want to be ahead of the game, or if you have somebody who is super, super critical to the company, it could be the right thing to do to prepare their H-1B petition in advance of the electronic lottery, not knowing if they're going to be selected, but just in case they are, so that everything's ready to go and you can send it right in. It's gonna be pretty crazy for the law firms across the country to prepare all 85,000 H-1B petitions in the 90 days of April, May, and June of 2020. So if there's like senior executive and they don't qualify for another type of visa, it could be good to start preparing everything in advance. Or if the candidate really wants to and it's really important in the negotiation of whether they'll accept the offer or something, you could throw that in as a benefit. So then March 1st to March 20th is the initial registration period for the lottery. Then March 20th to March 31st is when USCIS will select who is going to be eligible for an H-1B. Doesn't mean they're approved, it just means they have a chance to apply. And then April to June of 2020 is when all of the law firms will support the companies to prepare and submit any H-1B petitions for people who were selected in the lottery. And then, we'll see what this is going to do to the processing time next summer and moving forward. Probably in July, USCIS will start issuing requests for evidence and also issuing decisions about who gets approved or not. And then the earliest first possible start date will remain October 1st, but we don't know what will happen with premium processing and whether that will be available. And we also don't know just how long the adjudication process will take. Hopefully, because they're not rejecting 120,000 paper applications, it will streamline their efforts and allow everything to go more efficiently. But we'll just have to see how that works out. So, open questions. When exactly will the selections be announced? Why is there an 11-day window? I'm not really sure. How will the notification happen? I don't know. Is this enough time to file an H-1B? Perhaps. Maybe not. Could be tight. Will the system crash? That's another possibility, so hopefully that won't happen. But I think they piloted something similar with another visa type called H-2B for construction workers, and I think there were some issues with too many people accessing the system at the same time. So hopefully they're taking that into consideration. And then we also don't know if premium processing will continue to be available. They've kind of turned that on and off like a light switch over the last few years. So that's really H-1B and H-1B changes. And now I'll just spend a few minutes talking about the green card process and how that relates to people with H-1B visas and other employees with other types of visas. So there are kind of four main ways for people to get green cards in the United States. If somebody is from a country with low levels of immigration, they can participate in a free annual lottery called the Diversity Visa Lottery. There are ways for people to self-sponsor themselves if they're investors, if they're people of extraordinary ability, if their work is in the national interest, and that's the way a lot of startup founders end up getting green cards for themselves. There are also options for companies to sponsor employees for green cards, and so this is what most H-1B candidates fall into as professional workers. They would require a company to sponsor them for a job. And then there are also green card options through family members, the easiest being an immediate relative, such as a US citizen husband or wife. We've even seen sometimes where the company will pay the legal bill for their employee to get a green card through their spouse just because it's cheaper and faster than the company actually sponsoring that person. So if we hone in on the business green card pathways, they all have names that start with EB and a number, and that just means employment-based, first preference, employment-based, second preference. It's how the law was written about who the US wants to have here the most. So the highest preference includes 3 subcategories, so people with extraordinary ability, researchers, and multinational managers and executives. So, extraordinary ability is like an O1 visa, the genius visa, somebody who's at the top of their field or subfield in a country or in the world. But you don't actually have to be Einstein to get it. You just need enough evidence in certain categories, like are you a postdoc who's published many academic papers and been a peer reviewer for journals, and you've discovered things or invented things, maybe there's patents, maybe maybe your work has been in science. That's kind of like the scientific researcher route. Also in the startup world, we see a lot of CEOs and serial startup founders who have gotten acclaim and are thought leaders in their niche of technology, and so they could be eligible for that too. The researcher green card is not self-sponsored. It has to be through a company, and you have to have at least 2 people being full-time researchers in order to qualify for that. The multinational manager green card is for people who've spent at least 1 year out of the last 3 years working for another branch, for example, of the company in another country, and then they're transferring here, often on an L1 visa, and then that's the green card path for those folks. The EB2 category is for people with advanced degrees or outstanding ability, and this is where typically a company would put somebody in with a master's degree or a PhD. But it's possible for somebody to get around the perm requirement of where the company has to try to hire Americans to replace the foreign national to see if anybody else is able, willing, and qualified to do the job. If the person's work is in the national interest, you can get a waiver of perm, and then you don't have to try to recruit Americans for the job in this category. The other thing to know is that these categories often get backlogged based on the person's country of birth, because we have something called the Visa Bulletin, which notifies you of the people who are in line for a green card, who's at the front of the line, and how long have they been waiting for their turn. So ridiculously, Indian professionals with advanced degrees, a recent analysis said, there's like 400,000 people in this category, maybe more. Maybe actually it was probably in the millions, I'm not really sure, but based on like the 10 to 15,000 green cards available this year, if somebody is starting this process now in the EB2 category and they were born in India, they may have to wait like 150 years for their turn in line for a green card. And if you just have a bachelor's degree and you're in the EB3 category, it might be 50 years. Either way, it's insane and ridiculous, but what it means is that people born in India are trying to fit into the EB1 category, so they're not in those giant lines, so now there's more lines happening up here. So it's complicated, and the law really needs to change on this. My feeling is that it's kind of racist because it lumps people into categories based on their country of birth. And there's a proposal to abolish this system, but if they don't increase the number of green cards for the whole world, there would be about an 8-year average wait list for people from all countries. So I don't know how Congress will resolve that. We've also even seen companies that are funding EB5 green cards for their employees, where now the level of investment is $900,000 minimum per person, but previously at the $500,000 level for like cryptocurrency ICOs, we've seen companies that are giving bonuses of more than $500,000 to their key executives so that they could get in line for an investor visa. There's lots of ways to be creative about this if you want to be. So then, with respect to what's going on with business immigration, there are things to be aware of. The number of audits is increasing. We have this executive order from the president about extreme vetting, so it means that renewals and extensions are treated with as much scrutiny as an original application, so it's very important to be thorough. We've also seen businesses being inspected or raided, but that's less often in tech. And many people can attest to the fact that requests for evidence are on the rise. So when you're thinking about entering this process and you're deciding about whether to do it and how involved you want to be, there are certain factors that you can take into consideration to make that decision. So the first one is your time. For a startup that's scaling, somebody is I was just talking to somebody who's at a company that is hiring about 5 to 7 new hires a week. So they've gone from like 40 people to 240 people in the last year or two, I think she said. Gathering the information from all of your employees and responding to requests for evidence just to create, produce the documents that the attorneys will need could be a substantial investment of time. So it's important to have the human resources to devote to that process and just go into it with open eyes. For some small companies, the prevailing wage can be really important, that you need to be able to pay the candidate, at least the bare minimum for their level of expertise in the geographic area. There's these requests for evidence to respond to, there's government filing fees which need to be paid, there's legal fees for attorneys. On this note, most of what we do is all flat fee on a project basis. A small portion of what we do is hourly, where it's more free form, but most of it, it's upfront. You know how much it's going to cost, and just depending on the type of visa or the green card, there's different fees involved. And for H-1Bs, the company must pay all of the costs. You can't push those down to an employee. It has to be paid by a company. Now, a few other things, education evaluations I mentioned could be good to get those in now before the lottery starts. Translations of foreign documents are useful to have on hand, and then premium processing could be another cost if it's available, but it's something to talk to your attorney about. If you have a weak case or there's risk involved, then maybe it's not worth it to invest in premium processing. For the H-1B lottery, what we're doing is, we're happy to help initially get everything set up and register the candidates in the lottery for your companies. We're also happy to dive in later after the candidates have been selected. We would prefer to support the company now so that we can guarantee that we'll have the resources to help everybody in that 3-month window. But what we're doing is a legal fee of just $750 to help enter candidates into the lottery. And that way we're doing some initial, preliminary screening to make sure they're eligible, and conversations with the employee and the HR just to make sure everybody's on the same page about the process, and to make some initial strategy determinations about if they're selected, how are we going to prepare to move forward. And also for those super valuable employees that you want to make an investment in now, it still is possible to prepare the whole H-1B petition now before knowing if they'll be selected or not. So we'd love to support you. We're on lots of social media. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We have a website with a blog, a newsletter, and I have several TechCrunch articles that are behind a paywall on the ExtraCrunch website, but we'll be happy to share that with you for participating today. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to contact us, hello@alcorn.law, or our phone number 855-546-0015. So thank you so much, and now I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.